So let's explore how we become identified with thoughts in the first place. If you watch the mechanism of thought, and a good way to learn to do this is to learn to calm the mind through meditation, perhaps through mindfulness, or my playlist called Consciousness will teach you to learn to unload the polarities within consciousness, to calm the mind and slow down the mechanism enough that you actually see how the identification or the apparent identification seems to occur. Now, if you follow along with what I'm saying and look into your own experience, you may be able to catch it in real time. Now, I do want to say you probably want to approach this from a place of general relaxation. If you're feeling really triggered, really upset, feeling a lot of intense emotion, this may be kind of challenging. Otherwise, if you're in a place of a sort of neutrality, general curiosity, mostly overall, or for the most part overall physical relaxation, then this won't be too challenging typically. But what I want you to do is just to put your attention into this space of thought, wherever it is that it feels like you're thinking, wherever it is that it feels like you are centered right now in your internal experience. Or another way of saying it is to put your attention in wherever it feels like you are, wherever it feels like the being experience is, the conscious experience of you right now. You want to put your attention in this space gently, with curiosity, not any kind of force or any kind of struggle, which that will just cause kind of irritation to the system and make this much more challenging and or conceptual, which is not the point. If you just kind of relax your attention into this space of consciousness, of knowing, of being, and become curious, and then ask yourself, well, what thought is arising right now? Or even what is the next thought that will arise? And just become aware, curious, and pay attention. What I want you to notice as you practice this, and you may need to do this several times before you start to really get it, and or start again, because you might notice that you're kind of lost in thoughts without realizing it. But once you start to see the thought in real time, you start to notice, oh, I see the thought forming. I see how that thought feels, and I see how I seem to react to it. Then you're in a good place. So what I want you to notice is that as a thought arises, you probably have one of two general orientations to it. One will be something that feels like you want to push it away, or you want to recoil from it. You want to like back away from that thought. You want to move away or avoid it, right? This is kind of a tactile experience, tactile within that space of thinking. Or you may feel enticed by the thought. You may feel like you want to move toward it, or there's a kind of juicy curiosity about the thought, or you want to hold that thought closer, or you want to explore the thought. So you may notice, and at some point you will notice, that there's often one of those two tones when it comes to whatever thought is arising. So what I want you to do is notice, first of all, that, and then notice, where do you feel it in your body? Keeping your attention in the activity of thought or the activity of thinking, and yet still being open to feeling where that is signaling in your body. Where's the signal in the body appearing that's in association with not the thought necessarily, but your reaction to it? So what we're doing here is we're slowing the process down enough that you can actually see that you're reacting to thoughts. And the reaction may be subtle, and it may be not subtle at all, depending on the thought. In this case, if you're feeling generally relaxed and you're curious and open, probably a reasonably subtle response, but you should notice a response of some kind. And then what I want you to do is just watch what happens after that. So notice the response, in which kind of polarity that is there. Again, the magnitude doesn't matter so much, but which polarity is it? Like, I want to move toward that, or I want to move away from it? And then I want you to notice, how does that correlate with body sensation? How is your body mapping that? Okay. You may not find a lot in the body, and that's okay, but it's just something I want you to keep on your radar. Just touch into it. Then what I would suggest is, once you see how you're reacting, whether you want to move away or toward, and what that feels like, what the reaction itself feels like and how it's mapped, I just want you to kind of follow what happens next. Just noticing, not thinking about it, not analyzing or dissecting the process, but just noticing what happens next. And I almost don't want to say anything beyond this because I don't want to give you a map for it. I want you to find it yourself and explore it yourself. So perhaps you could like turn the video off and practice this for a day or two and then come back. That's up to you. But what I would suggest is, spend some time exploring this and seeing what happens after that. Staying in this general orientation of curiosity, openness, noticing the next thought or the next thought after that thought, noticing the feeling of wanting to move away or toward or enjoyment or non-enjoyment, and then that reaction's mapping in the body, and then just seeing what happens next. Do you stay with that thought? Does that thought subside? Does it remain? Does the pushing and pulling or desire or aversion in regard to the thought seem to amplify or decrease? Or is another thought appearing? And specifically, I want to point out that what we often get, what I think happens here a lot is that with this particular practice is that when it comes to the next thought appearing, we often don't notice that. What happens is we often identify with the next thought. So we can make an object of one thought, but then we get re-identified pretty quickly with the next thought. But by going through this process and breaking it down, you may notice what it feels like to start to identify with the next thought. Okay. And what I specifically want to point out about this, and I really want you to explore this yourself before you just take my word for it. Like I said, even if you go practice this, come back and watch the rest of the video. But what I would suggest you'll find at some point, if you really look closely at the subtleties of how we interact with thoughts, our relationship with thought and so forth, and it will be mapped in the body sensations. With time, you'll see this or you'll feel this. What we'll find often is that when we have, let's say, an aversion toward one thought, like one thought feels a little uncomfortable, this could be very subtle too, by the way, not like some terribly scary thought or something that gives us a kind of massive fear response or wanting to bury the thought, but just something that just feels a little bit uncomfortable. And it may not even be a fully formed thought. What we'll do often is somehow with consciousness, we move our attention away or turn our attention away from that. And then we tend to move our attention towards something else, toward another thought. And that contrast between the aversion and then what I'm just going to call a desire, although it's not necessarily a desire, it's more just like it's more like a magnetic thing. Like you have a repulsing pull, and now you have a kind of attracting pull, and the attracting pull will be the next thought. And often you don't notice that's happening, and you find yourself identified with it. So this is the mechanism I want to point out today: is that what gets us identified with thought is this kind of push-pull that has to do with how we react to one thought and then the next one and then the next one. And if you notice this chain, you'll notice it continues on. But you really, really have to slow all this down to see it. Now, as we talk about becoming aware of thoughts as such, really slowing the process down, even holding a standing thought, if the conditions are right and you're ready for it and it's an auspicious moment, then that can result in awakening. A complete stopping of this whole process can occur. And that's great. If that happens, great. Just stop. Don't do any more exploration. But beyond that, even after awakening and after integration has begun and after some shadow work has been done, we'll still notice these mechanisms of thought. But now we have access to the more fine points, the more subtle aspects of how this works. And this is what I'm pointing to. So you can explore this even in deeper realization, but it's a kind of nuance technique within the technique I describe frequently of resting in unbound consciousness, which again, you can use the playlist consciousness to understand that, first understand it, then practice it, and then kind of clarify and maybe even master it if you really take a lot of time with it, which is a very equanimous, peaceful way of practicing. And then within that, as you're entering from the space of, let's say, identified with thoughts or just a more active mind into that space of unbound consciousness as you begin to practice, you will start to notice this mechanism. And this is what I'm pointing out. I'm breaking it down into like minutia. So that's what this is. And it can really help to see how we become identified with thought and break that chain of identification. So let me know how this lands and if it works for you. But it's not the kind of thing I think that you'll just get intellectually. You really got to like do it and see it happen in real time for yourself, and or discover other nuances that I'm not even talking about in this video. But I would like to hear what people find.